You're on mute, Jeanette.
Oh, that was bound to happen, wasn't it? Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's online session. My name is Jeanette, and I'll be guiding us through the hour ahead. We've got a great lineup of speakers this evening who will be sharing their insights on key issues and opportunities shaping our district. The first half of the session will be presentations, followed by 30 minutes for your questions and answers. Feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box on the screen as we go, and we'll pick those up in the second half. We'll be recording the presentation and sharing it on our website so others can also watch it later. Let me briefly introduce our speakers. Firstly, we'll hear from Craig Hobbs, our Chief Executive, who'll provide a welcome and an overview of the district and its future opportunities. Next, Tony Whitaker will take us through the long-term plan. And finally, Gavin Iron will talk us through some of the key decisions around water services. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Craig.
Kia ora, Jeanette, and thanks for that intro. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for attending this session tonight. We really appreciate your engagement. It is a very important conversation that needs to be had around the future direction for the Waikato District Council, the impact on residents and ratepayers in terms of what the rates may be set, and that's obviously determined by the amount of work that we have to do. You have an opportunity to input into that. Just to give you context, the Waikato District Council is sitting right in the middle of the Golden Triangle. We're in a fantastic position. We're one of the fastest growing districts in the country. We're also the fourth largest district in the country. And just to give you a bit of context around that, we are 83% of the size of Auckland, of the Auckland Council area. We have a rating base of 33,000 rateable units. They have 629,000. We have 36 settlements in our district versus obviously the scale of Auckland. That creates quite a bit of complexity to it for us. We're growing at an incredible rate, but trying to keep up with that growth in terms of infrastructure investment, making sure that we provide the amenity that our residents want is difficult. And your mayor and councillors have been doing a lot of work over the last 12 months, pretty much, in fact, since the enhanced annual plan last year, determining just how we spend your money wisely to get the best value for money that we possibly can. We can't be all things to all people. It is really difficult. It's a balancing act. But this session tonight gives you an opportunity to understand the investment areas that we're considering, what we think we could do or shouldn't do, and we really do value your feedback on that. This is a very much genuine consultation process. Your councillors are online, they'll be listening, and they will pay attention, and I'm sure, where they think it's appropriate, they will make changes and adjustments to the plan. So please have your say, make sure you do submit and have your voice. But again, thanks for your engagement, and on that, I'll hand over to Tony to take you through the long-term plan.
Kia ora, Craig. So my job's really to welcome you again and to talk to you about the long-term plan and what can only be described as probably some of the most challenging times that we've had for many, many years for local government, but we also appreciate that we've got these significantly challenging times for our communities. So not only are we as the local authority dealing with inflationary and cost challenges, but we know that our communities, our ratepayers are as well. So it's a pretty challenging mix at this time. So, and I apologise for those of you that understand long-term plans, but just very briefly. So what we want to really share with you today is what is a long-term plan, why it matters, what conversations that we're wanting to have with you as ratepayers and members of the communities right now, what is the impact of the proposals that we're putting in front of you on you as a ratepayer, and importantly, as Craig alluded to, how to get involved, because we've got 2 weeks left essentially through to the 11th of May to provide specific feedback. So just to perhaps just frame up what an LTP is. So this year we're actually preparing a long-term plan for 9 years. Usually a long-term plan is 10 years, but last year Waikato District Council took a one-off opportunity to prepare a 1-year enhanced annual plan, because at that time we didn't actually have a solution that we could provide to the communities in terms of our waters business. So it was something that the government passed some legislation to enable councils to do a 1-year plan. So this time we're doing a 9-year plan, so to get us back on track. So it means that within the next 2 years, so probably in about 18 months or even less, we'll be starting the next iteration of the long-term plan, because long-term plans need to be refreshed every 3 years. So this one is probably a lot of detail in the next 2 years and less so in the remaining years, but it's for a 9-year period. And so what that long-term plan is what are we doing, or what are we proposing to do in terms of our contract with our community, why we do it, what's the cost of the activities and infrastructure, how it's all funded, and ultimately what that means for our communities. So just a little bit of a contextualisation in terms of how do we fund the services of council. So we fund the services of council in many different ways, from fees and charges for those members of our community or customers actually that are asking us for specific services like a building consent or a resource consent. We have fees and charges that enable us to charge for the cost of those services so that our ratepayers don't fund them. For our roading program, NZTA fund approximately 50% of our roading maintenance and a share of capital works too, but we'll speak to that a little bit later because that's all changed within the 3-year period. So we receive subsidy from NZTA. We receive development contributions from our developers as they need to essentially buy into a share of the infrastructure that council have put in place. We have targeted rates. So targeted rates are those rates where not everybody in our district receives a particular service. So it might be a water service or wastewater service or a refuse service where only parts of our community get that service. It's only those parts of our community that receive the service that pay for it. So we call those targeted rates. And then the balance, which are generally things that we would consider to be sort of public good, if you like. So they're things like roading, the balance of the roading maintenance, for example, that's not funded by NZTA, open spaces, libraries, our district plan process, all those sorts of things that there's a public good are funded by the general rate. And we'll talk about those terms as we go through the presentation this evening. So Craig talked a little bit about some of these key challenges that we have in front of us. So we're expecting significant population growth. Craig talked about the lovely space that we're in many respects from a growth perspective. We've got one of the highest growth, certainly one of the highest growth provincial councils in the country. So we get to enjoy the sort of thriving economic benefits of that, but it comes with real challenges in terms of how we ultimately afford the services and the infrastructure in particular that's required to support that growth. We're in a situation where the operating cost or the cost of running a council are increasing in quite unprecedented terms. So whereas you and I as homeowners are subjected to the consumer price index in terms of the basket of goods that we consume in terms of our food and petrol and things like that, council is subjected to cost increases with a different basket of goods. So for example, roading, it's the bitumen prices, infrastructure, it's the cost of infrastructure, not only materials, but the challenges at the moment in terms of the massive infrastructure projects and the availability of resources to deliver those. All of those things deliver inflationary pressures on council that we're experiencing. And so Infometrics, which is an independent economics agency, has said in the last sort of 3 years, infrastructure inflation is in the order of 27%, and the inflation that councils are subjected to is in the order of around 20%. And some of our infrastructure inflation is even higher than the 27. They say, for example, bridges is around 40%. So those are the sorts of issues that council is dealing with, and they're uncontrollable in many respects. So it's not all things that council has the ability to pull the levers on. We have over $2 billion of assets that council is responsible for managing on your behalf. Those assets need to be managed and maintained. We have increasing compliance obligations put on us by the government, which is another challenge that we're dealing with on almost a day-to-day basis, because we are a large tier 1 council. We're expected to do things as a tier 1 council, and one of the examples I'd use is the 3x3. So there's some legislation or framework that the government put in place to enable more houses faster, and so that enabled certain properties to have enabling frameworks to deliver subdivisions on these sections and sort of 3-story high properties. We were required to go through that from a district plan perspective. We had no choice, and so it meant that as a council we needed to pivot away from the work that we were doing on our district plan to support those sorts of things. Craig talked about the small ratepayer base and the fact that we are not that dissimilar to the size of Auckland, but we have 90,000 people as opposed to close to 2 million people, and that is a massive challenge for us. We have, for example, 9 wastewater treatment plants and 7 water treatment plants, which are about half the number that Auckland has, whereas we have 20 times less the number of people in our district to pay for. In fact, it's even worse than that, because not all of our ratepayers are connected to a water or wastewater service. Probably around 40% of our ratepayers are contributing towards delivering those very significant pieces of infrastructure. And the last piece, I guess, in that puzzle, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is trying to find a sustainable and affordable water delivery model for our ratepayers going forward. So the major things that we're out having a conversation with our communities about, there's probably 2 key things. The first one is, what are we going to do around our waters business? So you might be aware that currently we have a contract with Watercare to deliver our water services, and Waikato District Council is a council that for many, many years has realised that the delivery of water services and the affordability of water is a really challenging thing with the lack of economies of scale and that we have. So many years ago, we attempted to pull together or be part of a collaborative arrangement trying to get the economies of scale with Hamilton City and Waipa. That didn't work out, so we then went to Watercare and got Watercare to deliver the services for us, and that was all about trying to deliver some economies of scale with the relationship with Watercare. And so we're in the same situation now, because Watercare are wanting to move out of that relationship with us because they've got other priorities that they need to focus on in Auckland. So one of the things that we're consulting on in this long-term plan is the opportunity to continue the work that we are doing now in terms of a joint company with Hamilton City Council to deliver the water services for our district. And again, I reiterate, it's all about trying to get critical mass and economies of scale. But Gavin will speak to that a little bit more later on. The other key thing that we're talking about is the maintenance of our roads. So when we went out in October last year and did some pre-engagement with our communities, we asked a question around what are the really important things to you as ratepayers, and roading was one of the very high priority items for our ratepayers. And we even asked at that time, would you be prepared to pay more in rates to support more roading investment? So just by way of context, so every 3 years, council makes a bid to NZTA for subsidy for the maintenance of our roads. And we have done that probably about a year ago. And so the money we got this time was more than we have received in the past, albeit it was less than we actually pitched for. And that's about trying to continue to at least maintain the quality of the network that we have to look after, because we have one of the largest both rural and urban roading networks in the country. And so even though we've received more money from NZTA, the question that we have is, would you like us to invest more? Council's current strategy is that we will not invest general rate funds or your money as ratepayers unless it is co-funded with NZTA. So for us to invest more money than we have a work program for now would require 100% funded by the general rate. So we're asking the question of you as ratepayers to see, is that something that you want to do, or are you comfortable with the council strategy? And so this is the recommendation of council, to support the current investment, which is the co-share with NZTA, on the basis that A, it's more than we have received in the past, and B, we have some new roading contracts commencing on the 1st of July 2025, which we also believe will add some value into our roading network. So on that basis, council are comfortable with the recommendation in this proposal that we confirm or support the current proposal, but they're asking ratepayers whether in fact they would like to invest more in an unsubsidised way, and so that would mean a higher general rate increase that we will talk to a little bit later. Other things that we are consulting on is we have many community halls throughout our district, the majority of which are managed by hall committees that are elected around our district. So what council is doing on behalf of our community hall committees in this process, or it's a parallel process to this long-term plan actually, is seeking support from the ratepayers on their behalf for some targeted rate increase that they are requesting to support the ongoing sensible maintenance of their halls. There's a couple of sort of nuances to that. There's one hall, the Ruawaru Hall near Huntly, that is in a state of disrepair, and that hall committee are seeking support for deconstructing that hall and using some of the materials. I think some of the materials are brick, for example, to make some sort of a memorial in terms of to support that community and the people that want to be recognised in that community, and to have a nice sort of reserve space in that area as well, but to support not having a hall. So there's a number of targeted rate increases proposed by those hall committees that council are facilitating through this process. Rubbish and recycling is another really key issue. So we have some new services that are being proposed, and we're seeking feedback from our communities around. So there's a specific establishment of a monthly recycling pop-up service in Te Ako. So that community have had letters requesting their thoughts on that. There's a couple of things, however, that councillors have made decisions on already in the spirit of waste minimisation and in the spirit of trying to maintain costs for refuse and recycling services across the entire district, and in the context of some of the significant cost increases that councils are experiencing in terms of dumping waste to landfill. And so those decisions that council has made already is to increase the tag and sticker price for both bags and wheelie bins from $3, from $1.50, or doubling the price essentially for both tags and stickers. effective from July 2025, and that is simply to recover the cost of the service. These charges have not changed since 2018, and it's really now just catching up and ensuring that other ratepayers don't pay for this service that don't receive it. The other really significant issue that we do appreciate in the northern part of our district is moving from wheelie bins to bags and Tuako, effective from the 1st of July 2027. Again, this is in the context of waste minimisation, to ensure that we can ultimately get less waste going into landfill. And so we have statistics that suggest that wheelie bins are not conducive with some of those strategic outcomes. Just some other things that we are seeking feedback on is there's some changes to development contributions policy. Just a couple of things in terms of how we recognise retirement villages and something else in terms of different sizes of minor dwellings, particularly in the tiny home space, and there's some legislative requirements around Māori land. Fees and charges is something that we always consult on every 3 years, just to make sure that they keep pace with the cost of delivering those services. And just on in parallel with this consultation process, we have the waste minimisation and management plan that we're seeking feedback on. So what does all of this mean in the context of rates increase for our communities? I talked a little bit earlier around the distinction between general rates and targeted rates, and where general rates are rates that pay for those services that have a public good, like the portion of roading, open spaces, libraries, that sorts of things. And so the general rate is proposed to increase by 4.25%. The big increases are in the other areas, so particularly in the water space. So the targeted rate increases are around 14%. What that means for a typical urban property, so it's not 14% plus 4.25%. For an urban property, the average rate increases is looking like it's around sort of 9.5 to sort of 10%. So significant increases. So hence why we're wanting our ratepayers to engage and get feedback in this process. If you're a rural ratepayer, for example, we don't receive any services other than those public good services, so i.e. you don't receive a refuse service, you don't get a water service, you don't get a wastewater service, the chances are that your increase will be that 4.25%. At the other end of the spectrum, if you're an urban property in one of our communities that receives a reticulated water or wastewater service and a refuse and recycling service, it's likely to be around that sort of 9.5 to 10.5% increase. So as I said again, they're big increases. So just on that note, we're just going to now transition to Gavin, who's going to talk a little bit more around the water conversation. Gavin?
You're just on mute there, Gavin.
Kia ora tātou, sorry about that. So tonight, just going to give you a bit of a snapshot, a bit more information around what's happening with Three Waters. So as you've heard from both Craig and from Tony, we've got lots of challenges at the moment, particularly around growth and the continued development of our district, and also in finding affordability for our community as well. These challenges are very clear in terms of Three Waters. And from four particular perspectives: growth. So we have lots of challenges around being able to provide and facilitate the growth of our district by providing water and wastewater services. Also resilience and efficiency, sustainability and the environment, so balancing up growth with also sustainability, and obviously most importantly cost to our ratepayers. So the government's approach to this has been to introduce some legislation commonly known as Local Water Done Well. It's composed of 3 bills, and this legislation requires all councils to make some decisions about the future of Three Waters. So in terms of our thinking around this, the council sat down and started to think about what are the key priorities we have. First of all, the priorities, well, the first 2 really support the health of the awa. So we do have issues with water quality throughout our district and wider throughout New Zealand. So that's really front and centre of mind. And in particular, through Waikato Tainui's treaty settlement, the vision and strategy for the Waikato River, commonly known as to give effect to Te Ture Whaimana, is really important in the thinking and the way that we operate and the way that we consider Three Water services. Also, at the end of the day, a boundary between local authorities is really just a line on a map. So what we wanted to think about was facilitating boundaryless planning between ourselves and our neighbouring councils, so that line on a map doesn't become a constraint or does not affect growth and opportunities for businesses and for residential growth to happen. Customer service, obviously we want to ensure that we deliver a better customer service. That's always very important. Financial efficiency and affordability, really important. At the moment, there is not enough skilled people in the waters industry. So when we were thinking about what happens next, we're thinking very much about developing a skilled workforce and expanding a skilled workforce, having stable operations. One of the reasons why we are looking at change at the moment is that our contract with Watercare is coming to an end. So we want to ensure there is stability for the future, because when you're talking about Three Waters, you are talking about assets that last somewhere between 50 and 100 years. So you want to make sure that you have stable operations that go on for a long time. Economies of scale, Tony mentioned this before. So Three Waters is very much about the bigger the entity, the more purchasing power you have, the more chance you have of having a skilled workforce, the more chance you have to be able to borrow and therefore deliver affordable services for the community. And lastly, we wanted to consider solutions that would ultimately lead to a regional approach to Three Waters, which we think is the way forward. So to get there, we looked initially at 8 different options, but we settled on and looked very closely at 3 in particular. The first one is, as Tony referred to before, forming a company with Hamilton City Council, and that company would deliver water and wastewater services. The assets would be owned by the company, but remain in public ownership through that company. And then also the company would deliver stormwater services to the councils, both Hamilton City and Waikato District, and potentially other councils, but the assets would remain with the councils. And that's largely because it's very hard to find a suitable charging mechanism as to how the CCO would be able to charge the properties affected with stormwater. Second option we looked at was a regional CCO, which is it's called Waikato Waters Done Well. In effect, it's a company similar to the company that we're looking at with Hamilton City, This company will have 6 to 7 councils involved, but roughly it will have the same number of properties involved as our proposal with Hamilton City. Same thing, managing stormwater under contract to, if we were involved, to WDC and other councils as well. The third option we looked at was an external contractor, so effectively retain the contract we have with Watercare through until the end date for that contract of 30th of June 2028, then find an alternative partner to move forward beyond that point. So those were the 3 options that we considered. In terms of what we consulted on, what we're consulting on the first option, the company with Hamilton City, and the third option, which is effectively the status quo and the contracting model moving forward. Our preference is the company with Hamilton City, and the reasons predominantly are it has a future focus, gives us critical infrastructure faster, so that boundaryless planning that I talked about, it enables us to be able to provide and support growth and development better than we can at present. It would also improve the health of the river. So the 2 councils coming together have effect on 150 kilometres of the Waikato River, so a significant portion. That would mean we could really focus on improving the health of the river. And also very critical for us when we're thinking about a regional focus is leaving the door open to other councils to join us in the course of time, or the other CCO that I referred to, Waikato Water's done well, for the 2 CCOs to join together at a time in the future. In terms of financial impacts, as I said, the economies of scale give us greater purchasing power. It enables us to spread the costs fairly, and that means effectively we can borrow more money. It means that we can borrow for longer periods of time, which means that the ratepayers in 20 or 30 years' time are contributing to the costs of the upgrades that happen now. If we don't extend that debt over a period of time, then it effectively means the ratepayers of today are paying too much now. So we want to ensure that that doesn't happen. The setup cost of setting up a new company would ultimately be offset by efficiencies, and that's been proven in many examples. Both Watercare is a good example, but also many international examples of where a CCO bringing councils together has demonstrated efficiencies over time. Lastly, people and services. Effectively, the company would be led by a board of directors or managed by a board of directors. They would have more scale and therefore the ability to attract and retain staff. The ability to retain staff can come from the size of the entity. That means that staff can grow and develop into different roles over a period of time. And also having that sort of external focus gives an external oversight over the whole operation. So that's why we have recommended the CCO, the company with Hamilton City, as the preferred option moving forward. Now I'm going to hand back to Tony, who's going to talk to you about submissions and what happens next.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So hopefully you can understand through the conversations that we've had today, there's some pretty challenging and some big issues that we're needing to have feedback from our communities about. So we're running 27 engagement events like this, but we've got, I think, 3 online events, but we've got the balance events that we're running within our communities. So if you want to come and have a conversation with us in person, please look up one of those. They're actually registered on our website. There's a lot more information on our website. There's a consultation document, for example, which tells some of the stories that we've been sharing this evening. we need to hear from you. So we need to receive your feedback. There's all sorts of different ways to do that. You can do that online. We've got a really nice interactive engagement tool online, which means that you don't need to go through and provide feedback on everything. You just need to engage with those things that are really important to you and provide feedback in that way. There's other things, you can come to one of our engagement events and provide submissions that way. You can go into one of our offices or our libraries and our team will actually help you provide feedback that way. So there's lots of different ways that you can do it. But the important thing is that we do want to hear from you. So what happens from here on in is that once we receive the feedback, so this whole, our consultation program, our engagement program is running, well, it started on the 11th of April, it's running right through to the 11th of May, so that's Sunday week. That please get your feedback in by that date, because then the team will actually process and theme those submissions and feedback for our councillors to then have a conversation about with you if you want to. So submitters are absolutely welcome to come to Ngaruawahia and present their submissions in person if that's what you'd like to do. You don't have to, you can just provide your feedback in writing. And so those conversations are had on the 20th and 21st of May, and then ultimately with final decisions by council having considered all of that feedback on the 30th of June, with the new rating year and work program year starting on the 1st of July this year. So I think back to you, Jeanette.
Thanks, Tony. So we've got a few questions coming through now, which the first ones look like they're for Gavin. So Gavin, if Waikato District Council joins with Hamilton City Council in a council-controlled organisation, will we have to take on more debt? You're going to have to unmute yourself again, Gavin.
Sorry, rookie mistakes. Very good question. The answer is that obviously both councils, if we form a company with Hamilton City, both councils will bring their work programs together. So between the two councils, yes, the level of debt will be higher, and there's not a lot that we can do about that. But I think the important part will be we'll be able to borrow longer term. We'll be able to make sure that that the debt is shared intergenerationally, so over 50 years or longer, which means that the ratepayers of today will not be paying for ratepayers in 20 years' time. So it certainly, it's a balancing act, but it will overall help, I believe, moving forward. The modelling we've done indicates that whilst the level of debt will rise, the cost to ratepayers over time will reduce.
And will creating a council-controlled organisation for water services mean higher rates?
Look, when I said it would reduce over time, it meant what I really meant to say was the increases will not be as high. Okay, so in the first 5 years, you won't see savings, you'll see costs will continue to rise, and that is simply as a result of the program that we have at the moment. There is a lot of Tony talked about the 16 plants we have. We have 5 wastewater treatment plants that come up for consents within the next 5 years. That requires significant investment in order to move forward and meet the new standards that are coming in terms of delivery of wastewater services. So if we can think long term, because Three Waters is a long-term issue when you're looking at assets that will last 50 or 100 years. So if we get through the first 5 years, then we will start to see benefits as we start to be able to get efficiencies from a larger organisation, better procurement benefits, more distribution of debt across for a longer period of time, and efficiencies from the operations as well, and from a skilled workforce.
Great, thank you, Kevin. So a question for Tony. How have you decided what's most important to include in this long-term plan?
Thanks, Jeanette. So I guess what we did right at the outset is the council has developed some strategic priorities, and so these were priorities that enabled the staff to go away and develop work programs specifically connected to those strategic priorities, which the councillors believed were important for their communities. So that way we developed sort of targeted and specific work programs as opposed to sort of a broad brush what was of interest for staff. We've absolutely focused on maintaining what we have, and that's not only our infrastructure but also maintaining levels of service and trying to get better at those levels of service. We've also just tried to honour a number of things that have been in long-term plans for quite some time. So rather than go out and necessarily explore new things, so we've got, for example, the Pokeno Hub that's been in the long-term plan that the community have been expecting for many, many years. And so we've honoured those sorts of things as opposed to going and exploring other opportunities in these times that require constraint. And probably the other thing that I would mention at the time is just say that we do have a real focus on improvement within the business. And in that context, we've baked in around $2 million worth of cost savings into the budget, not all of which we have solutions for at the moment, but that's our commitment to our community to say that we actually need to be part of this efficiency drive, if you like.
Thanks, Tony. We've got a question for Craig. Craig, how is council making sure that it has the right people, skills, technology and processes in place to run efficiently and deliver what's promised in the long-term plan?
Oh, what a big, good question. Look, Jeanette, just if I could say to start with, I've been with the organisation now for coming up 3 months, and I am really impressed with the quality of people we have in the organisation and very proud of the work they do. I think when you look at the amount of media or negative media we get, it's very limited, which suggests that we do a pretty good job. Sure, things will go wrong every so often. It does hit the front page of the Waikato Times, but that is a reality, and we don't learn unless we make mistakes. To answer the question directly, it is one of the challenges that we have in the operational space. We have a long-term plan we're consulting on at the moment. Most of the investment is targeted at infrastructure, at community good initiatives that are required. How do we actually keep some money back to be able to improve what we do internally? Technology is obviously a key issue in that. How do we take out a lot of the low value, high volume work and automate that to allow people to do the more, grunty strategic work? So that's important. I think we're constantly pro-mapping our processes, so mapping and determining where we can be better, getting rid of the snarl-ups and the hold-ups. In terms of investing in the right people, good recruitment. At the end of the day, we want the right people with the right skills, but also the right attitude, passion for the business. And the majority of people working for council do have that gene where they want to contribute to the district, to the ratepayers, and do the right thing. So hopefully I've answered the question, but it is a challenging area.
Thanks, Craig. We've got another question for Tony. Tony, what is council doing differently this time to make sure we can keep rates affordable?
Jeanette, it's linked to probably my first response in some respects. So we did some pre-engagement with our communities back in October. And again, that was about trying to understand from our communities what was important to them. So that again, linked to the strategic priority conversation that I mentioned a little bit earlier, to make sure that we could deliver or pull together work programs that hopefully landed for our communities. And I guess just again, I'd reiterate the commitment that we've made around the cost savings, which I guess Craig's just alluded to as well.
Nice. Craig, how is council going to keep up with growth that's happening right across the district at the moment?
It's the challenging question that we've just been addressing, Jeanette. Both Tony and Gavin have talked about that. It is difficult. We have a lot of disparate communities that we need to invest in and support as they grow. Look, we have to be selective to a degree. We have to make sure we're going where the growth is occurring in terms of providing the infrastructure, and that's easier said than done. I think growth in itself, though, generates more opportunity, obviously more ratepayers, more investment into our district, and making sure that we can leverage that growth, and working with our partners, the developers, the contractors we work with, making sure that they're also contributing. They do through development contributions, which were referred to earlier on by Tony, but also how do we make sure that they are investing and getting value out of the return that they're making into our district around infrastructure provision. So multifaceted answer, but it's a really important issue for us, making sure we do keep up with the growth in those nodes where it's occurring.
And Tony, last question for you. How are we making sure that council that community feedback is genuinely being listened to and used? I know you touched a little bit on this in your presentation, but probably a good one to just reiterate.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette. So I'll just again reiterate the fact that we've committed time and energy and resource to a number of our staff to attend the 27 events throughout the district. So we have staff travelling all over the district, which we talked about a little bit earlier is not small in that context. So that's a massive commitment by the organisation. We absolutely have found lots of different ways for our communities to engage, whether it be go to one of our libraries or our service centres, where our staff will help our people make submissions if it's just not part of who you are naturally. But yeah, so online, we've tried to provide all sorts of different ways that ultimately hopefully will land for people in terms of how they make those submissions. And it was interesting, actually, we did a little bit of a reflection today in terms of the enhanced annual plan and the submissions that council received through that process that were significant, and the process that council went through in terms of the submission point and the response to the submission. And so all of that information is available to the councillors as they make their decisions. And I think that that's a really good reflection of the fact that every single submission is in front of our councillors with the response in terms of how they've dealt with that submission. I think that's a massive commitment with the number of submissions that we get. So absolutely. that will continue.
Absolutely. And you said earlier that people can choose to, if they want to come and speak directly to council as part of that hearing process following the submissions.
Yes, thanks.
Well, that's all the questions that we've got that have come in. So I think we will close it off there. So thanks again to everyone for joining us this evening, and a big thank you to our speakers, Craig, Tony and Gavin, for sharing your time and insights. Just a quick reminder that tonight's session has been recorded, so it will be available on our website. And if you'd like to watch it or you want to share it with others who haven't been able to join us tonight, then absolutely do that. We really appreciate your time and engagement, and have a good evening, everyone.